Live streaming is on.
Okay, hello everybody. It's Monday or not, depending if you're watching live or not. Or I am not going to say good morning or afternoon because it depends on whether you're watching it now or forever. I don't know. So just welcome. How are you? Are you wearing your mask? And if you're not, you should. Maybe not because of you, but there's other people who can be affected if you don't wear it. So just think. Well, on the other side of this screen is the amazing, masterful, and above all, incredible human being, Mr. Peter Bagge. How are you, my
Thank
friend?
you. Thanks for the kind word, David.
How are you?
I'm doing fine.
How's the family? How's everything around in your area? Is everything going a bit back to normal, or is still as crazy as it was a couple months ago?
Yeah, nothing's going back to normal. We're having another spike, a little spike in the COVID business in the area I live in. I'm in Tacoma now. I think when I met you, I was still living in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
We now live in Tacoma, which is just down the road from Seattle. So the same area pretty much.
And what do you think of this apocalypse? I mean, some people have... I always remember Howard Chaykin was really funny. It was like the second one of this I did. Like, yeah, it's an apocalypse, but it's not the apocalypse we got in movies. It's just like the most boring apocalypse ever.
Oh.
Like in the movie, like the red clouds, blood is falling from the clouds. You have zombies. You have all that. Here is like, don't walk out the door. Why? Because if you go out, you walk out, you die. So like, it's kind of boring.
Oh, well, that's one way of looking at it. Being a cartoonist, both my wife and I, we both work at home. So in that sense, all of this doesn't feel very different. Our lifestyle hasn't really changed. I mean, and we could still go to a handful of restaurants that are open, so long as everybody's able to sit far enough apart.
Mm-hmm.
So other than going to a movie theater, it hasn't been, for us, it hasn't been all that different. Mm-hmm. Only I recently, for work, I had to travel. I had to fly to across country to do a job. And so since I've been back, my wife has been quarantining me from herself. There's actually you can't see it, but there's a piece of tape behind us from the chair to that table, which is just like in a TV show. It reminds me what part of the house I'm allowed in. So for 2 weeks,
you're living a procedural. You are like in a CSI show now.
Yes. So just so we don't get too close. Mm-hmm. And the same, our daughter, who is married and she lives nearby. She also for 2 weeks won't visit because of she's pregnant for one thing.
Oh,
so she's being extra cautious. But yeah, so I won't be seeing her for 2 weeks.
Well, safety first, I guess, right?
Yeah, sure.
And what is you mentioned movies, and is that the thing you miss the most going to the movies, or what you guys miss the most with all of this?
I mean, at home we watch, and we still do, of course. We watch plenty of movies. I'm indifferent about going to a movie theater. My wife likes it a lot. She for her at least once a month, she would like to go to see a movie in the theater just for something to do. Doesn't even matter what movie it is. She just enjoys going to the theater once a month. But of course we haven't done that for 3 months.
And do you remember? This is a trick question. Do you remember the last movie you went to a theater to watch?
Boy, that's a good question because I can't think of what movie it was. What movie was that? I can't remember what the last.
Do you know why I asked this? Because I've realized, asking other guys while doing these shows, that even if other people used to go, really often to the movies, and it's happened to me too. I have to think about it. We don't remember the last movie we went to watch.
Oh, really?
It's like a life before the pandemic, and now it's another life in a way. So.
Yes.
People actually don't remember, and they are every time I ask, except if they've watched another shows with the bastard, then prepare and try to remember it. But most people, they are like, shit, I can't remember, and I know it was 3 months ago. How is it possible that I don't remember?
Yeah,
and I'm like, maybe we passed the page in a way.
Yeah, include me in that group. I can't remember for the life of me what the last one was. I can remember movies I saw in the last year. I just can't remember what the last one was.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't Avengers.
No, no, I don't. Superhero movies. I saw one superhero movie in the theater in the last 2 years, and it was because a nephew of mine was in town, and he really wanted to see one of them. I think it was Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's like when I'm watching a superhero movie, it's all the same identical plot. It's the scripts are written with a template. It's like this. The same plot points happen at the same. You could run the movies side by side, and this, where the protagonist, if it's a male protagonist, meets the female protagonist, says something stupid that makes her eye roll. Then later on, she falls in love with them. About 15 minutes before the movie is over, it looks like all is lost. But, somehow they save the day. It's the same exact movie. Every single one of them is. But, they'll keep doing that because the public doesn't seem to care.
Yeah, by the end of the day, how can I say it? Origin, complication, salvation.
Right. There you go.
In a way, and I have, they're fun. I am not looking, when I go to watch one of them, I am not looking for Citizen Kane, if you know what I mean, or for The Searchers, or for, Kieslowski or something like that. I am just going to have fun.
Right.
But I think it's the same thing with the Star Wars. And if the Star Wars fans are going to hate me, but I'm going to say, I'm sorry, this, change the character, but they are all the same movie in a way.
No, I liked the very first Star Wars movie. I saw it when it came out, and then the next one, I saw the next two in the theater. Each one I liked less than the one before it. Now the new ones, I don't even bother watching it. I heard I watched at my neighbor's house. I watched all I call them the Jar Jar Binks ones.
the prequel. No. Those ones I always make the same joke. I prefer to think that was, a nightmare. They are not real.
Oh, they never happened.
They are so bad. I'm like, no. No.
But then I heard the new one. I heard the new ones are better. But I can remember I started to watch one of the newer ones and watched 10 minutes of it, and I was just like, I'm not watching this. I could not care less. I'm not invested. Just don't care.
Yeah. I always make the same joke about the prequels. That in the first one, they tell you there was a galactic senate and all that, but they don't show you because you don't need to know. It's like they tell you the backstory, but the prequels, it's all filling in the gaps of that backstory. And you're like, I didn't need to know. I didn't need to see 40 minutes of a galactic senate session or the midi-chlor. What was the name? Or that the force is caused by something called the midi-chlorians and all that. So in a way, like everything that you needed, like there should be a book titled "Everything you didn't need to know about Star Wars." We are going to give it to you in 3 movies. But when you work, I just thought about this. When you work at home, because I have again really different types of answers on this one. You need silence. Absolute silence, or it depends on the phase?
Oh, well, silence is preferable. The thing is, I grew up in a very large family, never had my own bedroom. My wife grew up in a huge family, never had her own bedroom. So we're just used to a ruckus. So in the house we live in now, we're very good friends, especially with these neighbors next door. They have a bunch of little kids. The little kids just come running over here. Well, they don't come barging in now that because of the COVID stuff.
Yeah, of course.
They'll come charging towards me and then remember and stop. They don't jump on me anymore. But we're both kind of used to a ruckus. So even though total silence is preferable, I'm used to it so I can work with chaos going on around me. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of, especially artist friends of mine who did grow up either like as an only child or practically an only child, they would, if they're at my house, they would marvel at what what chaos I can work through, because to them, they're like, oh my God, that little kid who's not even your kid just barged into your studio and grabbed stuff and you just kept drawing.
No, in my wife's and in my case, we are both, we were all, five brothers, like five siblings.
Yeah.
So, and I never had my own bed either. I have to share with my brothers. Right. So I also need cacophony. When I work, I need to have noise around because I'm used to noise. Right. And if I am complete silence, I am like, what's going on? Somebody trying to come from behind me and kill me. That feeling that you need the noise because you always have noise around you.
Right.
But I was asking because some people have told me that while they are writing on the writing stage, they need absolute silence, to concentrate, to focus. And same when they're doing layouts. I don't know if you do layouts first, but when they are doing thumbnails or layouts, because they're composing and fitting things on the page, that's the silencer part.
Right.
But then when they go to inks or when they color, like it's more technical. Like now, then I have music or a podcast or something on the background because
exactly the same with me. I could have music or the radio on all the time when I was younger, but now, yes, when I'm writing and also lettering, especially when I'm lettering, I can't have any music on. I need total silence. And it's just like the other artist you talked to said. Then once I'm inking, then I could listen to a podcast. Mm-hmm. Especially when I'm lettering, I do this thing where if the radio is on or a podcast is on, I'll accidentally write the word that somebody just said.
Oh shit.
And I'm like, why did I just write evidently when that's not what I meant to write? It's like, because I was writing what the person said.
Oh, Tesla has a new Model C car. Wait, did I just write that?
That's right.
Why comics? I mean, I guess you grew up reading comics, as most people tells me. But what was it that made you want to make that your living, your professional work, or that was something that moved you in that direction? And when I say comics, is comics instead of something else?
Right. Well, that was part of it. I always liked comics. I was always attracted to them. Would always read them. When I was younger, I especially liked the funny pages, newspaper comic strips like Peanuts. And then later I loved Mad Magazine and National Lampoon. I liked satirical work, funny comics. I never was much of a superhero fan. If there was one lying around, I'd read it. But I honestly don't think I ever bought a superhero comic. Mm-hmm. But the other thing too was that I was a terrible student. I was no good at anything else. It was like something that I felt like at least I had the ability. This is something at least that I could do. Mm-hmm. And the biggest holdup was what type of comics to do. By the time I was in art school, I no longer really had any interest in doing a daily newspaper strip, but mainly because I didn't like what happened to newspaper strips. There weren't any I liked. And the format seemed very restricted. And then the same with like Mad. It was obviously a closed shop. It's ironic that later on I drew for Mad, but they asked me to. But at the time, it still was the same 20 people, And
that's what I was gonna say. Mad for a big amount of time, it looked like close hunting grounds, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Like only those guys, which were really good. I'm not telling you otherwise.
Yeah, sure, I agree. Yeah, no, I agree.
You have Credo and all the others, you cannot complain. But it looked like nobody could get in, right?
Yeah, no, I didn't want to replace any of them. And I certainly didn't feel like I was better than any of them. So it's like, why would they change it, You just have to wait for them to start dying. The big inspiration for me was when I discovered underground comics. That whole, especially Robert Crumb's comics, but not just him. And it was just using comics as a way to express yourself like a fine artist. You just take that comic book format, but it's all your work from cover to cover. I thought that was perfect. So as soon as I saw that, and especially Robert Crumb, but I also loved a lot of the other ones, Gilbert Shelton and Bill Griffith. Once I saw their work, I was like, that is exactly what I want to do. That's what I want to do, is what those people are doing.
Yeah, other artists have told me. Javier Olivares was with me on Thursday, and he was telling me that a big part of why he decided to do comics, he does illustration too, and magazines and graphic design and all that. Like, my main desire to do comics is that is the only art really when the whole process from beginning to end, it can be me.
Right.
I can do in any other art. You don't control the process. You are a part of the process.
Right.
But in comics, you can do it from beginning to end.
Well, that's what I didn't care for about mainstream comics, was that it was assembly line. I'd look in the credits and somebody wrote it, another person penciled it, another person inked it, and I didn't like that. I still don't like that idea. I have collaborated with people, but it was always by choice. It would always be, well, what would happen if I had this person illustrate a story that I wrote, or had this person ink something that I drew. So it'd be like just to see what the end results were. But ultimately, I also like to do everything, and I still do that.
And what is it in your opinion, in the comics language? We're talking about process now. In the comics language, that makes it so unique and special. I always say, and you're going to call me crazy, and you're entitled to it because we're friends, that comics is the only thing, the only art that can that defies actually Einstein's theory of relativity. Because as creators, you guys control time from the first corner or the first frame of the first panel to the last one.
Right.
Just changing the shape determines time, and you can spend 20, 40, 60 pages in 1 second, or do one panel per second, and go back and forth and intermix, mix the times of your story, not even going, with like the movies, like, oh, this is a flashback and I have to tell you it's a flashback. You can just change the shoes of a character in one panel and you're telling the reader this is a different time.
Right. And also, well, you still have some control over how fast you want time to go in a movie or a television show, but those movies and TV shows also are somewhat fixed format-wise. A movie could be anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, but it's almost always 2 hours. And if the director wants it to be 4 hours, the people financing the movie will say no. Whereas a cartoonist can make, if you're doing a graphic novel, ultimately the cartoonist can make it as long or as short as he wants it to be. I always thought it was strange how certain famous movie directors are called auteurs, because most likely they have their own vision. People do what they say, and there's a good chance that they wrote the movie as well as directed it. But they're not auteurs like a cartoonist is. A cartoonist literally does, or if you want to, you can literally do absolutely everything yourself, whereas a director absolutely can't. For one thing, he needs actors. Nothing's going to happen without. So he's dependent, and he has to work with the actors. He has to collaborate with them on some level, you know. And the same with everybody else: the lighting people, the sound people, etc., etc.
Yeah, and it's very obvious when there's directors like, for example, Ridley Scott is a perfect example of director who doesn't like the actors. He likes to do his own things, and the actors are a tool he needs to use.
Right.
And other directors. But in this case, there was a really famous Spanish movie critic that when they started putting on the movies, what was it? Movie by, instead of directed by, movie by this guy or this, he always got really mad because he said, as you just said, it's not by him. It's a whole team doing a movie. It's disrespectful for everybody else. A movie by Steven Spielberg, like in all the other 500 people who have worked on this movie.
Right.
And I think he was right, because you can say that in comics. In your case, especially, because you do writing, pencils, inks, and lettering.
Right.
And but when I was talking about the time, control of time, I wasn't talking about how many pages you use, because you can do also that in a novel.
Right.
Anyway, so that's more or less the same. I was talking about controlling the tempo. If you know what I mean,
Yes.
from the panel shape to the
Yeah, sure.
to going back and forth, moving around. Do you think that's unique of comics, or that they can do it also in other arts?
Yeah, well, in visual arts, yeah, I'd say that's fairly unique, especially again with one person being in total control. Yes, and the format you choose to work in, it's limitless. You could pick any format, like we were saying before.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for the most part, I'd agree.
Uh-huh. You just mentioned Shelton. You mentioned Cram, Mad, and the others as influences. Is there any non-underground comic creator or creators who has influenced your work?
Well, they would be, again, it'd be similar type artists. It'd be like the Mad Magazine artists and Harvey Kurtzman. But it's like I didn't discover Kurtzman's own work until I guess I was 20. I had an art teacher who told me about him, and I loved him. And that's going back to read what he did in the 1950s and 1960s. And Basil Wolverton, again, even though you couldn't call him an underground cartoonist, his work certainly had that look, and he obviously inspired underground cartoonists. So yes, people like that, and also someone who was as big an influence on me as Crumb was Charles Schulz. When I was a kid, that was my absolute favorite, was Peanuts.
Yeah, that you mentioned before comic strips.
Yes.
And again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I always thought that a big influence on your humor was some of those comic strips.
Yeah, no, especially
that mix of a slice of life with humor, with the reality we see compared to the reality there is. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is one thing is what we want to see, and the other thing is what's really there.
Right.
So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. And lots of times in my comics, especially early on, like in Neat Stuff, the comic that I did in the 80s, a lot of times I'll suddenly realize that a piece of conversation between two characters, which I'd realize they sound exactly like Lucy and Linus from an old Peanuts comic. It's almost like I ripped them off. That doesn't quite happen anymore, but that used to happen to me a lot, where a conversation would be between two people would be exact Robert Crumb and Aileen Crumb when they do their comics together. And I just like, oops, I think I ripped them off a little bit. Sounds too much like them. It's not a comic, but another source of inspiration that really inspired the way I write dialogue was a TV show, All in the Family. I don't know if they were shown in Spain. Yeah, that was another thing too, where sometimes I'd think that sounds just like Archie Bunker from All in the Family. I think I ripped Norman Lear off a little bit.
And that's the second part of the question. You just mentioned All in the Family. Any other influences from not comics, from movies, TV shows, aside of All in the Family, as you just mentioned, in terms of plotting, but mostly, as you said, in terms of dialogue?
Well, that show, and that show was a huge favorite of mine. So was the Dick Van Dyke Show, which was created by Carl Reiner, who just passed away, and I loved Carl Reiner. And also when I was a teenager, my favorite movies were anything by Woody Allen or Mel Brooks.
I was going to mention Mel Brooks, so you just got ahead of me.
But especially, well, Mel Brooks was like strictly satire. It was like Mad Magazine. It was seeing a movie version of a Mad Magazine comic. But with Woody Allen, it was also like, I remember when in high school, me and my friends went to see Sleeper, which we thought was hilarious, but that was also very satirical.
Yeah.
But I was blown away by Annie Hall. When I first saw Annie Hall, I'd never seen anything like it. And I just could not believe my eyes. I just was knocked out by that movie.
I think I watched it like 20 times. It's one of my favorite
Yeah, that's
movies
what
ever.
I would always rather watch a movie I'd never seen before than one. Even if I liked it a lot, I tend to avoid watching movies more than once.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's a movie quite a few times.
Could you say that Neat Stuff was more Mel Brooks and Hate was more Woody Allen or not?
No, I'd say they were both Woody, because just because Mel Brooks was such straight, Blazing Saddles was a satire of westerns,
Mhm.
and Young Frankenstein was a satire of horror movies. Unless I was like working for Mad Magazine doing something for them, I rarely did straight satire like that. Like this is a spoof on this comic. It's a bit more personal, even if the characters looked ridiculous. Like Girly Girl, still was coming from a personal place, right? Still people that I blog for, people that I knew. So I would say it was always more Woody Allen-ish than trying to think what other writers that I really loved when I was growing up. When I think of them, I couldn't really say that they had any direct influence they had on me. Like I loved Kurt Vonnegut. He was a huge favorite of mine. And I also loved Tom Wolfe. Maybe Wolfe was but he wrote, it wasn't until late in life that he wrote any fiction.
Yes.
He was a journalist. Although that's interesting, I later on, I'm a cartoon journalist and still do nonfiction. In fact, these days, that's all I do is nonfiction comics.
What about music? Music influence your work in any way? Or
yes,
as we said before, as a background that also, depending on the time in your career, I mean, sometimes you're listening to a kind of music. I don't mean the fashionable music at the moment. Right. That music takes you in a certain direction.
Yes. It's. I couldn't pinpoint any type of music that influenced my art itself, but there's always musical references in my comics, especially in Neat Stuff and in Hate. There's a lot of. And sometimes I'd be making fun of music I don't like, but also if I'm listening to something a lot, especially even if it's something corny, something from the past, Doris Day. If I find myself listening to Doris Day a lot, I'll reference Doris Day in whatever comic I'm working on at the time, or whoever I'm listening to. I'll just kind of sneak it in, and it's a little bit a wink and a nudge towards anybody who I think might be listening to a similar thing. Something I've noticed is that I've never met a cartoonist that wasn't a big music fan. And a lot of cartoonists are also musicians. I'd say most cartoonists I know play an instrument or are in a band. But even if they don't play an instrument, they'd be passionate music fans and very knowledgeable and they'll be familiar with more obscure music, something from the past. There'll be somebody who's really into pop singers from the 1950s, and then like Robert Crumb famously likes old 78 records from the 1920s, early 30s. Somebody would be not just into punk music, but only a very specific type of punk music from a specific era. The cartoonists tend to be, they're all very particular music fans too.
Yeah, it's curious. I think that probably music and comics are the most connected arts. Even movies have music, TV shows have music, whatever. But that's a part of the making. But I always think that comics and for whatever reason, comics and music are always connected. The guys who would be cartoonists would be musicians if they weren't cartoonists, and the other way around.
Right, and comics too. When you're writing them and when you're reading them, there's a rhythm to it. So it makes sense that a lot of cartoonists are musical because if you have a sense of rhythm, for lack of a better term, it helps with your writing and how you lay out a comic or panel. There'll be a beat to it. And how you decide to lay out a comic, it's all about building a rhythm, building a pattern.
Yeah, it's the pacing and also knowing where to alliterate, where to do the transition between panel and panel.
Right.
That means you gotta have, as you said, pacing, control the pacing from beginning to end. Do your characters fight you? And I mean, when you're writing something and suddenly your characters tell you, "This is not what I could do. This is not the direction. You're wrong. Going that direction. Your third act is crap. I don't like it. Go back and change it."
You mean like change my mind about the whole story when I'm already writing it?
Yeah,
or when
literally your characters tell you when, the other writers have told me that the characters fight back at them, telling them, like Greg Rucka told me that he had, a novel plotted. The first act went great, second act went great, and when he got to the third act, characters started telling him in his head, "This is not what I could do. This is not me. You gotta change."
Right. Yes, but that of course has happened. It usually happens while I'm in the process of writing, and that's rarely happened when I'm already drawing something. It's rare that I'd make a major change in a story once I've gotten past the writing stage, because I always have it completely written out in a script format. Everything is pretty much set once I start drawing it. But I don't imagine it's the character fighting with me. It's me fighting with me. Of course it is.
No, of course it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor, but it's funnier to tell it this way.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, for one thing, your protagonist is almost always you, the author. That's always some version of you. Even though there'll be differences, there'll be obvious differences. Otherwise, you wouldn't have created the stand-in. There will be personality quirks or events in their life that wouldn't have happened to me. But basically, their motivations, with not just even like the main character, but everybody, you got to be able to get inside their head. You got to understand what makes them tick. And you can only do that if you're relating to them on some level.
Mm-hmm. Wait, let me say hello to people so they don't think we are ignoring them. Paula Ventimiglia, hello. Angel Perez, hello everybody. Let's go with another week of fun and wisdom from the guest, not for me. And hello to Mr. Badge. Hello, Felipe Brel. Felipe Gonzalez Fernandez asks, "Hi, Peter. How have you experienced the evolution of the American underground comics? Do you think that the issues that were discussed in the 80s are still valid and that we have not changed at all?"
So what was the beginning of the question?
How have you experienced the evolution of the American underground comics?
Well, underground comics eventually evolved into what I guess you would now call alternative or indie comics. And when you look at that as a direct link, a direct evolution, it's become much more encompassing. When the earliest underground comics, a lot of the other artists were very, very influenced, particularly by Robert Crumb. And so a lot of people are doing what Robert Crumb is doing. And so it tends to be the range and subject matter was a bit narrower when they started in the late 60s. And early 70s than they are now. Now it's just everything. And the same with a lot of those artists, including Robert Crumb, a lot of Art Spiegelman, all of them, Bill Griffith. They themselves as artists, they greatly expanded what they wound up writing about and drawing about. Mm-hmm. And that's true with everybody. So to me, underground comics just became this enormous field of comics that we have now. It turned into writing and drawing everything, writing about everything.
Do you think that diluted underground the kind of values or the kind of stories you guys wanted to tell? So, because that happened also with music and with movies. Everything that was tried to be alternative, it became indie. Most movies were created by the studios, but they created smaller parts of their business to get those indie movies in. Do you think that diluted the vision or the ideas you had, or that it actually expanded it?
It expanded it. Well, what comic books have going for them that movies don't is movies are so expensive to make. So there still are very independently made movies. But for example, you'd hear, "Oh, you've got to see this new movie. It's really good." and the person made it for only $50,000.
Mhm.
But which for a movie that's incredibly cheap. But then when you think about it, $50,000 is a lot of money.
Give them to me. I did it for my mortgage.
Yes. So yeah, it just doesn't cost $50,000 to make a comic book. I mean, you'll hope that you'll make $50,000 off of it, especially if it takes years out of your life to draw the thing.
Mhm.
But you know, even though chances are you won't even make that much. Most cartoonists don't make that much off of one graphic novel.
Mhm.
But that said, it's so much cheaper to make.
Mhm.
You know, so that is another reason. Well, that's another reason why we do have auteurs, real actual auteurs in comics, is that what it takes to make them is so much less expensive than a movie or a TV show or even a play.
Mhm. Let me see. Leyendas del Multiverso ask, "Hi Peter, what's your favorite comedy movie?"
Oh, well, I guess we were just talking about it. It'd have to be Annie Hall, probably. A young person seeing that movie for the first time now, they're not seeing how remarkable it is, because it's been copied to death. Almost every romantic comedy takes from Annie Hall. So there's no way for somebody seeing it for the first time now to realize how unique it was. And like I said, I was just knocked out. I couldn't believe what I was seeing from the very beginning. It opens with just Woody Allen's head talking straight to the audience. I'd never seen that before. It might have been done before, but I've never seen anybody do that before. And that's the very first, in a movie theater, it's just this big, funny looking head, and he's looking right at you and talking to you and saying very hilarious things. And so just that alone was remarkable. Go ahead.
No, please.
But there were other movies at that time, Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. They knocked me out just because they were so funny. And the same from that same era. So I guess this is when I was coming of age, this 1970s, and really understood what I was watching. Another one would be the Monty Python movies. The Lost Grail, again, straight satire, but very, very funny. Funny in a way that I'd never seen before. That's another thing that I find a bit frustrating, is telling a younger person about Monty Python. And they'll watch Monty Python and they'll be like, okay, it's pretty funny. But that's another thing it's impossible to explain or illustrate how, when I first saw Monty Python, both the movies and the TV show, again, you'd never seen anything like it. You never saw anything remotely like it.
Yeah, I remember watching as a kid.
Yeah,
I am the fifth of five brothers.
Okay,
just to give you some context. So my older brother is like 13 years older than me, and I remember them bringing home for the first time, was in VHS or Betamax or something like that. Life of Brian. And Life of Brian is in Spain. Most movies, as you know, they're dubbed on cinemas, but that one wasn't. I think it was because the church didn't like it,
right?
So it wasn't dubbed. You could only see it in theaters, in the original version and subtitled. So I remember watching Life of Brian. I think I was 5 or 6, and just being blown away. And then my brothers started talking about Flying Circus,
right?
And I don't know how they found the tape, but and I was watching Flying Circus and Carl Sagan's Cosmos when I was 5 or 6. So imagine and then they were buying Savage Sword of Conan.
Oh, okay.
And Crumb comics. I was reading Crumb, Savage Sword of Conan, watching Monty Python and Cosmos.
Okay.
At that age. And believe me, I keep telling younger people, you are missing a lot. Watching that when you're 5 or 6,
right.
Thanks to my older brothers, all of that cauldron are amazing stuff and influences. But at the same time, I think it was just amazing.
Right. Yeah.
And the Monty Python, they keep telling, John Cleese keeps telling that they couldn't do it today, that they could never be allowed to do these movies today. Do you agree?
No, that's what people are always saying is, could you do that now? I don't think we could do that now. I don't think we can make that now. And even the people who made these movies and TV shows, they'll say, I don't think we could make today what we were making back then. Maybe not exactly the same, but people now will very casually write and talk about things that you couldn't back then. Even back then, it'd be shocking to, like, a TV show when we were growing up, where it's like where the protagonist is gay, and it's not remarkable. It's just a simple fact. Now you would have that, and nobody blinks. Nobody thinks twice about it. You know, it's just, okay, so he's a gay guy. But back then, first of all, you couldn't do it, or if you did do it, the plot would be about that. You know, it would just eat everything up.
Yeah. There's an amazing documentary on Apple TV that I don't remember the title now, but it's exactly about that, about how all the actors and actresses that were gay or bisexual had to hide their sexuality.
Right.
And of course, everybody knows about Rock Hudson and some other names, but 90% of the names they mention as gays who have to hide it and all that is astounding. It's like what? Right. All these people had to live, hiding their true identity, true sexuality during all their life.
Right.
It's actually terrible if you think about it.
Well, what's even stranger is that until fairly recently, there were so many people in the viewing public, who didn't want to believe it. They didn't want to believe people were gay. And there were certain, like in America, there were certain comic actors like Paul Lynde, Charles Nelson Riley, not super famous people, but people they were on TV a lot. Everybody knew who they were. And if you were the least bit sophisticated, you could tell this guy is gay. There's no doubt.
There's no
doubt about it. The most famous example would be Liberace, the piano player Liberace, who had his own TV show in the 1950s. And sure, anybody that who had their eyes open would be like, this guy is so queer. He's so gay. There were so many people who refused to believe it. Even if you told them for a fact, they'd go, no, you're lying. You're lying. They would refuse to believe that Liberace was gay.
Yeah, that's actually the first name they mention, and they talk about his couple, and how people knew that some guy or this other guy was gay because, of course, he left all his money, etc., to his actual couple, and then people fill in the dots, and you are like, you didn't fill the dots when every single time he appeared in public, he appeared with that person.
Oh, right.
It took you 40 years. Like,
right.
Okay, I just say, I guess it's denial. And things have changed in a very positive way because you just said it. It's natural, nobody blinks.
Right. But there's now it's like everybody, almost everybody, unless you really live in an isolated world, an isolated community, almost everybody is accepting of the different lifestyle choices and different ways of being, different kinds of sexuality. But yeah, it used to be, so many people did not even want to, they resented even thinking about it. They didn't even want to think about it. Years ago, I remember it was the 1980s, 1984, and I was at somebody's house out in the suburbs, and the Olympics were on. And it was one of those sports, I think it was diving, and somebody who knew it for a fact made a joke about, I think it was Greg Louganis was a diver, and he later on, came out as gay. But somebody who was there, just made a joke about it, just made a wisecrack about him being gay. And there was a woman there, a grown woman was watching, and she went, no. And he goes, yeah, no, he's gay. Greg Louganis is gay. And the woman, she looked like her head was going to explode. And she didn't want to believe it. And then she was like, why doesn't he just stop it? Why doesn't he just stop being gay? Why is he doing this to me? She was so angry. The thought of it it ruined the show. She couldn't watch him dive with this thought in her head.
Yeah, he suddenly became the most admired diver in the world because he was, the best in the Olympics and all that.
Right.
And I remember once that he, bumped his head, when jumping.
Oh yeah, sure. And he freaked out because he thought.
Yeah, and I remember people talking about, oh my God, he's going to infect and kill everybody.
Right.
And you're like, what?
Right.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work that way.
It's funny that you brought that up because that reminds me. That's one of the many things that, not just me, what's happening now with COVID, how it brings back memories of when AIDS first became a thing, when that was a pandemic, and there was an equal amount of, just like now, there was an equal amount of confusion and uncertainty about how it spread and how likely you were to get it. And at first, they almost, some AIDS activists even exaggerated how easily you could get it just to get everybody concerned.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want people to think, oh, that's only, gay men and drug addicts, and that's not my world. I don't know those people, so I'm not worried, and so I don't care. So they exaggerated the ease to which you can get it just to get everybody worried, which was a mistake because it made people super afraid of gay men. Like if you breathe, like even Luganis didn't know. I mean, there's once another swimmer couldn't get infected from his blood. It was in a pool full of chlorine, but he didn't know that. Nobody knew. Nobody knew at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me see. Noah Van Skyber, I guess you know him. It's hello, Pete. Peter likes Perry Como and Johnny Mathis, he says.
What about Perry Como and Johnny Mathis?
He says Peter likes Perry Como and Johnny Mathis.
Johnny Mathis, I could take or leave. I mean, he's a great singer, but Perry Como, actually, I enjoy listening to Perry Como. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on another live podcast with Noah, the person who just wrote.
Okay.
So I'm going to be sick of Noah by tomorrow.
Okay. Just MR asks, hi, Mr. Badge. What would be your main advice for someone who wants to start creating comics?
Just draw a lot. Get the most important tool to have is a sketchbook, and just fill up the sketchbooks just to improve your art and just develop your styles and write down ideas. And that's how you create your own voice, is just constantly doodling and drawing and writing down ideas in a sketchbook. Just fill up sketchbooks and make it a habit. Bring it everywhere you go and constantly draw in it as much as force yourself to, even if you're not the least bit inspired. Once you've decided that's what you want to do, as soon as you decide, I want to be a cartoonist, then the only way that's going to happen is you have to make it your job to draw all the time. Eventually you won't be like, I don't do that anymore. I don't follow my own advice, but I did. Once I decided I definitely want to be a cartoonist, I knew I really had my work cut out for me. So I would fill up countless sketchbooks, just writing down anything.
Yeah, it's the same thing for writers and in any other art, I guess, but especially in comics. If you want to succeed, keep doing it. Repeat. And also use real life. Copy from real life. Even if you're going to have a, exaggerated cartoony style like Peter has, you have to understand reality first, right?
Yeah. No, and even though my drawing style is ridiculous, the humor is all pretty much from real life. It always surprises, you just reminded me of something. It always surprises me when somebody says to me, I want to be a writer. That phrase always throws me for a loop because I just think, well, then write. What do you mean you want to be a writer? To me, that's like saying, I want to be an eater. Well, eat food. It's like it's such an easy thing to do, to start writing down words, especially now with word processors. Start typing. Start typing. It's like, that's so strange thing to say that you want to do, and yet you're not doing it.
That's why most of the people, let's be honest and blunt here, we can be, because we're alone. No, we're not, but whatever. Just cover your ears if you don't want to hear these people. The people who usually says, I want to be a writer, never become writers.
Right. No.
because
No,
they talk the game, but they don't play the fucking game. They are not spending their time head down, type. Shut up, type.
Right. But you're not even to write. You don't even break a sweat. You know, it's not like I could see somebody saying, "I want to be a mountain climber," but you can. There's many reasons why they're not. You have to get to a mountain. You need equipment. You're afraid you're going to fall. None of that is true with writing. When somebody says, "I want to be a writer," it's like, okay, you can start writing right now, right where you are. You could start writing. You know.
Yeah, it's a matter of write, find your voice. If you don't write, you won't find your voice.
Right.
You know, that's the famous phrase by Picasso, or attributed to Picasso. I want inspiration to find me working.
Oh.
Because he was asked about inspiration. Like, nah, I wanted to find me work. I'm going to be working. It'll come.
Right.
I am not going to be sitting down like this and waiting for the master stroke to come to my head. If I am not working at all times, it won't never come.
Right. And I once saw he was older, but I once saw somebody was filming Picasso, and he was just drawing. He had a paintbrush and must have been paper, just black paint on paper. And he's drawing ideas. And he drawing really fast, and he just kept going, nah. He had like 2 different piles, and most of it garbage. This is good. Garbage. But it's like he was making it immediately. He was processing everything so fast. You know, so there was none of that like, what should I paint? He would start painting before the idea was fully formed. You know?
Yeah, that's what I meant. He was like bam, 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 and then pop.
Right.
And then, okay, this works, but only because he could push it himself.
Yeah. You had to look at it for
And in terms of the art, I don't know if you agree, but I think it's the same thing. Working as following reality, understanding reality, interpreting reality, but repeat means you are going to find your voice. Right. If you keep saying, I want to do the perfect piece, you won't have a voice. You will just repeat what you've seen from other people.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Okay, let me see what they say. Hamaru Pixai. You have to change your screen name, Hamaru. It's always difficult for me to say it. As a cartoonist, how do you deal with the idea that if you don't do amazing technical drawings, people won't care? I mean, I have cool ideas to make funny strips, but my drawing is not amazing.
Well, with the art, it just has to be accomplished enough to tell the story. Like, for example, one artist whose drawing style isn't the least bit remarkable is Strapati, who did Persepolis. Mm-hmm. You know, the art there. There's nothing. She's not showing off at all. There's nothing. But it's good enough. It's good, and the most important thing is the story is fantastic. Yeah. And so the art was good enough for her to tell her story, and that's like one of the best-selling comic books of all time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, you don't need a remarkable, dazzling drawing style at all. It's just it really just has to be good enough to convey the idea, to convey the story. I used to teach at a local university. I used to teach a comics writing course, but I had no choice but to make all of the students draw their comic. It wasn't enough just to write it. They also had to draw it because they had to, whether they were an artist or not, they had to figure out how to combine words and pictures. So the students in the class, some of them were art majors, and others, in fact, I'd say most of them were English majors or creative writing majors who couldn't draw at all. But the writing majors, they did better. They made better work than the art majors, because the art majors, for them, they were more interested in the art, and they were not good at storytelling. They weren't good writers. And even if they did come up with a pretty good story idea, the art would get in the way. They were too concerned with showing off their art skill. And so the art came before the story. Whereas with the writing majors, the story. It was always about the story. It was entirely about the story,
Mhm.
and that drawing would just be good enough to convey that story. And it always came out, even if it was stick figures, it was always so much more enjoyable. So yeah, the story is paramount. The story always comes first, and the art has to service the story.
But those artists that you were teaching, were they interested in being comic artists, or they were looking to work in other fields? Because if they wanted to be comic artists, they should have known storytelling is first. Everything is second to a storytelling.
Yes. Well, they would. What I think a lot of them, most of them took this course because they thought it would be easy.
No.
Yes.
Comics easy. No, man, no.
But it would be the very beginning of the class. As soon as I would start talking, I would tell everybody what I just told you, that form follows function. It's always about the story. So this is not, even though we'll be making comics, I don't care how well you draw. You have a drawing teacher for that. Mm-hmm. This isn't about that. This is about using comics to tell a story or a joke or whatever it is, and convey an idea. And so the art majors, they would know that right away. I don't think and this wasn't always the case, but it usually was with the art majors. Even when I would tell them that, they probably were thinking, okay, no problem. I get it. I understand you. I don't think they understood what a struggle that was going to be for them. How their art style would be. They couldn't help, because they think so visually, they couldn't help but put the art first, and how they were not building everything on the story, It's and that's why they always struggled. In this course, it was amazing how often they struggled more than everybody else.
Yeah, I was talking to Mark Brooks the other day, and he was telling me, and I agree with him, that he also works in illustration aside of comics. He works in illustration and also, does some work in movies or video games. And he was telling me every time they meet him and hey, what do we do? What's your usual work? It's like, oh, I'm a comic book artist. And he was like, how do you guys do that? Most of the artists were telling him, in other media and other fields, how do you guys do that? I think it's impossible. It's the most difficult thing. And like, he was really surprised, not now, but at the beginning, he was always surprised by them telling him, man, what you guys do is the most difficult out of them all. But then you start putting the pieces together. Yes, because comics combine all of the others.
Right.
And you have to be able to do the alliteration, the jam, the storytelling, the narration, to tell the story in many ways that they cannot fathom how to do.
Right. It's not like a painter will just do a painting, but for a comic artist, you're creating a page, and in that page, the whole comic page, that has to work as a single piece of art. The page has to work. It has to have its own sense of composition. What has weight, what has focus. It all has to work on that page, but that page is made up of a bunch of individual drawings, all the panels, and each panel has to work. Every single panel has to work as a piece of art. And then you're also incorporating the words, the word balloons, and they're part of the art. You have to leave space for them. You can't bunch them all together. So there's so many things that you have to think about. It's amazing that we're not all rich. It is so hard to do.
Let's be honest. Yeah, because if we talk about the difficulty of creating the art form, and we talk about how much money, I'm not saying the movie guys, the storyboarders, or the video game guys, blah, 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 shouldn't make a shitload of money. Good for them if they do.
Right.
But comics is the most underpaid art of all.
Yeah.
Because it's the most difficult, and it should get a lot more credit and a lot more.
Well,
build a union, my friend. We're going to build a union, you and me.
Now what I'm thinking is, why do we bother? Why does anybody bother making a comic? Maybe we're idiots. We're masochists.
No, because we love them.
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah.
I think it's just the other day when people ask me about as you just said about the money. The other day somebody was asking, building a career making money, and I literally answered, if you want to do comics to make money, go do something else. This is not how it works. We don't do comics because we want to get rich. We do comics because we love comics.
Yeah, it's a compulsion. Yeah, I know. It's like you have to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't. Otherwise, you
Yes.
would.
There's no way we can avoid it. Damn it. Let me see what they say. Is it Noah asked you, Noah, you are going to have him tomorrow? Stop asking. No, I'm kidding.
That's fine.
Is it true? No, I'm kidding. Is it true that Gary Groth would make cis cartoonist share a hotel room at a convention while he got his own room for himself?
Read that again.
Yeah, because he asked, is it true that Gary Groth would make six cartoonists share a hotel room at a convention while he got his own room for himself?
No. Gary Groth would get a room for himself, and he wouldn't get any room for it. So, yeah,
okay.
maybe, yeah.
Let's not get into trouble. Felipe Real, talking about Picasso, the exhibition of the RAA in London about Picasso and paper is superb. Okay, Philip, send us the catalog. Send one copy to Peter and another one to me, because we cannot be in London watching that exhibition.
Oh,
don't make us envious. Don't do that. So I don't want to forget to ask while they concoct on the other questions. Why the evolution? From your satire, and of course the talking about this, the social commentary in a way. When and why did you decide? Okay, now I'm going to start working on biographies or more, non-fiction work. Was it that you said, I told the stories I wanted to tell here, and I just literally want to change what I do and get more journalistic in a way, or was it something else?
It was because truth was, if not just stranger, but more interesting than fiction. It was like, why should I strain to make up a fictional character and make up things for him and her to do and say, when I'm reading about an actual person who did these incredible things.
Mm-hmm.
So I started out about 20 years ago. Well, two things. I started doing journalistic comics, originally because I was asked to, but I was hired to do these journalistic pieces, but I enjoyed doing it. Once I had done it, I thought, there's a lot I could do with this. I want to do more of this. This is interesting. And then just from reading biographies, and I should back up a bit. I myself found that I was reading less and less fiction and more nonfiction. I found nonfiction books to be far more interesting than fiction, and documentaries were more interesting than the usual fictional movie. So I just simply found real life that much more interesting. And when I would read a biography about somebody, at first it was like certain events, like certain elements of the person's life, I would perceive it as a comic.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be a little, they might not have even, the intention may not have even been to be funny, but I'd be laughing at something that some famous person did or said. And I'd immediately think of it as a comic. So then I started doing it. I started doing these little one-page comics about America's founding fathers, because I was interested in them, but while reading them, I found them very funny. And then later on, I was hired, a magazine hired me to do one-pagers about scientists. Mm-hmm. Scientists at their eureka moments when they invented something or discovered something.
Yeah, like Fleming discovering penicillin and all that, right?
Yes. And then the story started getting longer, and then after a while, I felt like I could do a whole book. I think I could do an entire book-length biography, so I started doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'll do any more of those. I did 3 full-length biographies, but there's so much work, because you still have to write and draw the book, just like any other comic book, but there'd be so much research involved. And so
that's what I was going to ask. How much time do you have to devote to research on those books?
Take a year. That would take a year just to read everything and pull read everything that I could find about. I'm not a fast reader, and just pull I would double check everything. For example, if I might read something that the person did in one biography, but I go, okay, well, this is something to write about. But I'd want to read that event described in another biography. Just I wanted to know this really happened, and that this isn't just a biographer making things up or misinterpreting something, because a lot of biographers do have an agenda.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they will really, if not completely make things up, they'll really distort what somebody did or said. It's incredibly easy for a biographer to make someone look very bad. And it's all spin. Just like you could, I've never met your next door neighbor, but if you tell me about your next door neighbor and you don't like that person, it'd be very easy for you to convince me that your next door neighbor is a horrible person just by the way you tell, just the way you describe how the person.
just a small nuance can change everything in a biography. Absolutely.
Yeah, and taking things out of context, all that kind of thing. Just what you put the emphasis on. So so that would be a problem. I would read everything that I could on this person until it's like, okay, I'd reach this point where I'd be like, all right, I'm reading the same thing over and over again. I pretty much know what I'm going to say. Even if there's more to read, it's getting repetitive. And that's when I'd know, okay, now I could start working on the book. But yeah, all that research, it's very time consuming, and you're not getting paid for it. Nobody's giving you extra money for doing all that research,
Yeah, that's like expecting a movie writer to be paid for the research, but those guys pay somebody else to do the research for them because they earn a lot of money. So
right. So whereas with fiction, you're just making stuff up. You just sit down and start typing.
And why the female protagonist? Was it that you were looking to work with females, or just that those stories were the ones that interested you the most?
Well, that was and there's been entire books and articles written on this, but there was something about the mind, and it wasn't true of all women, of course, but there was something about the mindset of a lot of more ambitious, creative women from a certain era. And I'd say that era was especially between the two world wars. Women won the right to vote in 1920, roughly, both here and in the UK. And there was a bit of a mindset then, and it might not have been overt, but for a lot of women, it's like, okay, we won. Of course, they didn't really have full equality, but to them, the first wave feminists thought, well, we won. It's like there's no excuse. Whatever it is that I want as a person want to do, I'm going to do it. There's no reason why I can't do it. So they were incredibly brave, and they just lived their lives just doing whatever the hell they wanted. They were utterly fearless, or they acted like they were completely fearless. And that's something that I noticed while reading the life stories of women from that time. So that's why I thought of it as a theme. It's like this was a really remarkable time, and these were really remarkable people. And the fact that they were women made them more remarkable. So there was a certain theme there. So then the publisher of those books, the publisher of Joint and Quarterly, a guy named Chris Oliveros, we figured, well, let's write one. We picked Margaret Sanger as the subject for the first one. And to see how it, and then it's like, well, let's sit back and see how it comes out. And we were both happy with the results. So we did two more. I think at one point, early on, we were thinking we'll do a whole bunch. But the following two, I don't think they sold as well as the first one. In fact, I know they didn't sell as well as the first one. And also, it was just too much work for not enough money. So it's like, all right, 3's enough. We'll stop at 3.
You can focus on it like in a movie. You did the trilogy.
Yes.
And then so you're leaving that behind. You're leaving
well, I still do. most of the work I'm doing these days is for a magazine, and it's also online called Reason. So you can see a lot of my work on reason.com. And I used to do journalistic pieces for them. When I'd have the time, I'd pick a subject or cover an event and do a 4-page comic about it. But now I'm only doing biographical pieces for them. So I'm still doing biographical comics, but they're just 4 pages. So I will either encapsulate somebody's life in those 4 pages, or I'll take a segment of that person's life, you know, a certain particular point in time in their life, and do a comic about that. And so that's the main thing I'm doing these days. So and it still involves a lot of research, but
that's what I was gonna say. You keep doing the research then.
yes, but they pay me decently, so it's worth it. It's definitely worthwhile to do it for them.
Okay, and aside of that biographical work, you're doing something else in terms of comics, I mean, that involves journalism in a way, or not?
Yes. And I did that for them for a long time. Like, for example, to cover like a political party convention, you know, which I've done in the past. An event like that, a protest of some kind, those would be obvious things, or else just pick a theme, like talk about how people relate to their local police department. And so I'll go to some events, I'll go to some town hall meetings, interview people on the phone or via email, and then cobble together a story of some kind. But it's strange. That was getting harder and harder to do. When I first started doing stories like that 20 years ago, everybody was eager to talk. And it didn't matter if it was just a regular person or if you're interviewing a politician, somebody famous. They would answer all my questions honestly. They'd be very matter of fact about everything. And now, not at all. Now everybody is really cagey. Everybody is very suspicious of the media. And there's a lot more journalists, you know,
yeah,
in quotes, because everybody has a blog, a podcast. People write all kinds of crap on Twitter and Facebook. So everybody's gotten burned. Everybody's gotten badly burned. Just like we were talking about, a lot of people have agendas. So almost everybody now, you don't even have to be famous or a politician. Almost everybody has had that experience where somebody interviewed you and then it appears online and you're like, well, wait a minute, that's not what I meant at all. Yeah. And now I'm getting all this hate mail, and now I might get fired from my job because this person distorted what I said. So now if I want to cover a story, when I reach out to the people that I want to interview, they, more often than not, they just simply don't write back to me. They won't return my phone calls. They just completely ignore me. Wow. So it reached the point I kept complaining to my editor at Reason. It's like, we agreed on a story. Like, I'd be like, I'm going to do something about, you know, I don't know, legalizing prostitution. And she goes, okay, that sounds good, to do it. And then a month, 2 months later, she'll say, how is it coming along? And I'll literally, like, nobody will talk to me. Nobody will talk to me about this. It's like nobody's getting back to me. It's like, I don't know what to do. So, I'm in a different situation than the people who are staff writers for a reason, because they have a whole bunch of journalists who work full time. So one person would be, for example, that would be her focus, is writing about sex workers and sex trafficking and prostitution. That would be her beat. And so she has this ongoing, he knows how to work that beat. Whereas I'm coming from out of nowhere, you know? Yeah. And I think too, some people are a little bit funny about the fact that I'm going to turn them into a comic character. And the funniest thing, the last piece I did was about immigration detention centers. Like, you know how here in the United States, it's become very hard to be an immigrant.
Mhm.
And we put that they're not jails, but they might as well be jails, these detention centers. And there's one in my hometown. So I did a piece about this detention center, but there's these competing groups who are trying to help the people in the detention center. So their motives are the same. They all want to help the poor people that are stuck inside these buildings and stuck in this system, but their way they go about it is very different. You know, some people, their motivation is their religion. They're devout Christians, and their Christianity says you've got to help these people. For other people, they're literally communists, and they want to overthrow the whole government, not just dismantle this system. They want to dismantle the United States. And so, of course, like the religious people and the hard left political people, they don't like each other. So I remember one woman, this very Christian woman, she said, "You're not going to interview those other people, are you? You're not going to interview the communist people, the Antifa people?" And I said, "Yeah, no, I am." And she went, "I don't want to be in the same comic as them."
Wow.
She was, "Don't draw those people. I don't want to be a drawing, and they're also a drawing." I thought it was so funny that that's where her brain went.
Yeah,
she's envisioning this thing, and that her worst fear is to be.
Yeah, the most important thing is not to get those kids, that people out of the detention center. Is that I share a fucking panel which that blows my mind. I'm sorry, my friend, but that shows their priorities, which is wrong.
Yes, yeah. Originally, I thought, well, like, I'm generalizing when I call them Christians. Some of them weren't in this group for religious reasons, but a lot of them were not. And of course, that's fine. And originally, I wanted to work with them. I wanted to do volunteer work with them, but they were constantly doing fundraisers. Well, they were constantly having these fundraisers. I didn't like the way these fundraisers were being run.
Mm-hmm.
Just as constant, and of course they needed money. I knew that they needed money, but so much of the money they wanted was for this van. They parked this big, huge, like camper van, one of those big trucks that's like a living room inside, and it has a kitchen, and they needed it because when the people came out of the detention center, they'd go into the van and they'd help them. They'd get them a bus ticket or a plane ticket. They'd give them some food. They'd give them clothes that fit, because they might not have, all they'd have is it might be winter. And when they went into the detention center, it was summer, and all they had was a t-shirt and shorts. So they were doing, and a lot of people would donate the food and the clothes, and they needed money for their plane tickets. But this van, I couldn't see it. The van seemed fine to me, but these women, they were older, retired women, they kept complaining that the van was leaking. So all this money they were trying to raise was to buy a new van. And I was like, this van is kind of like, the immigrants don't, the people coming out of the detention center, they don't care. And also, I never saw the leak. I don't know what they were talking about. And it's it was mainly.
If there's a leak, why don't you fix the leak instead of buying a new van?
That's what I thought, a tarp. And I went and said, it's like, again, there's all these women who live comfortably in nice homes in the suburbs. And I said, well, if the leak is, I never saw it, but I said, why don't you just throw a tarp, a big plastic tarp over it? And I can remember their answer was, oh, that's what my husband keeps saying. And I'm like, yeah. My husband said he'll do it. And I'm like, let him do it. They don't want a tarp. They want a brand new van, but it costs $80,000. So I'm like, this is where all the money's going.
That would go to help the immigrants.
Yeah, this is to make you more comfortable. So that's why I stopped working with them. It's like, oh, you and your van.
Oh my God, that's so.
Right.
Anyway, Say Design says, "Hi Peter, could you tell us about your experience at Weirdo?"
Well, the experience was mixed. It was a lot of work for very little money, and I knew that going in. Robert Crumb, who started Weirdo magazine, when he asked me to help him edit it, he told me right from the get-go, this is going to be hard work. There's not much money in it. I was still eager to do it because I knew it would be a good working experience, and I really wanted to work with Robert Crumb because he is my all-time favorite artist. And so I was very, very honored for him to ask me to even help him with this, even though I knew it was going to be a lot of work. After 3 years, I had to quit. I just simply couldn't afford the time that it was just eating up all of my time, and I wanted to just focus on my own work. And again, like Crumb warned me, but it was very difficult being an editor, being a boss, being the boss of other cartoonists. Some of whom were great to work with, and others were impossible. So it's like being an editor isn't much fun. And but working with Crumb was fantastic. He was very nice to me, and he always gave me great advice. He gave me really good advice. So for that, I don't regret it for a single second.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna mention, that good or bad experiences, but it's gotta have been an amazing learning experience for you, right?
Yes, yeah, and just I wanted to be a cartoonist mainly because of him. I wanted to be a cartoonist like him, the way not like I wanted to do comics just like his comics, but I wanted to work independently, be an auteur like he was. So but he was 15 years older than me and had 15 more years of experience. So it's very good for me to see things through his eyes, and also just to have him explain to me how he keeps going, how to keep this alive, and the kind of mindset you need to have to persevere and not give up. And because everything I went through, every struggle, every bit of second guessing I would do, he'd been through that. He'd already been through all of that. So I never surprised him. I would say, sometimes I really feel like, I'll be despairing. I'll be full of despair. And he goes, oh yeah, I know. And he would tell me he'd been there. There's nothing I could have said where he hadn't already been there and done that. Yeah,
but that's probably the best advice you could get as a young creator. I mean,
right.
Persevere, fight back, because there's always going to be I'm not going to say a blue sky, but there's always going to be a door that opens after 20 that are closed, right?
Right. Yes, exactly.
Let me see. Noah asks, are you going to do a memoir?
Oh, no. Which is a bit hypocritical of me, because here I do comics about other people, and I'm showing every aspect of these other people's lives. But yeah, no, my life is private. I don't. I still do comics, like with these journalistic pieces that I was doing. Of course, I would always draw me in it, because it'd be me interviewing other people. So I would draw myself talking to this other person. But that's pretty much as personal
as far as you want to go. Yeah.
I don't want to. If there's something about my life, my personal life, that I feel is a story that needs to be told, I'll fictionalize it. I mean, that's what Buddy Bradley was a stand-in for. It's just a fictionalized version of me. That's and the same with my other graphic novels. There's always the protagonist is usually me on some level, in some sense.
Well, yeah, but you're the creator. There's always going to be a part of you on your characters, but of course, but that's also what I thought. Buddy was not you, but it was your way to channel what you were living through, or your experiences in a character. It was, again, I never thought it was you, but I always thought he's the conduit for to tell your life story in a way, right?
Yes, I will. One thing I should say though is I did come close to doing a memoir, but it was about me and my older brother, and my older brother passed away 2 25 years ago. But ever since my older brother died, and he died like at the age of 40, I always saw his life as a story, or specifically his life pertaining to me and him. So that would have been a memoir. And I did write it. It's all written. It's not a very long piece. And I was seriously considering doing a book about it. But, I myself have mixed feelings about it. And what made things even more difficult is my siblings, and especially my surviving siblings, and particularly my other brother, really don't want me to do it. My younger brother adamantly does not want me to do it. He just feels like it's a betrayal and airing dirty laundry, all that kind of things. So that only adds to my thinking. It's just one more big reason why not to do it. And it'll be a lot of work for not much money. I just, unless by some miracle this comic about my brother becomes a big hit, but I don't envision that happening. So to answer Noah's question, if I did do a memoir, it'd be that. And it'd basically be the story of me and my older brother. But there's a very good chance I won't be doing it.
Okay. What are you reading?
Excuse me?
What are you reading?
What am I?
Comics or not comics? What are you reading these days?
What am I? Well, again, I'm doing these short biographical pieces.
No. What are you reading?
Oh, what am I reading?
In terms of comics, not comics, what are you reading these days?
With comics, it's like every now and then one of my publishers will send me a huge pile of work, and I'll read it. I'll read all of it. Might not like all of it, but I like Noah's comics. Noah Van Sciver, the person who's been asking these questions, and I'm not just saying that because he's watching this. I like all of his comics.
It's not out of fear, Noah.
Yes, I like his. He does very good biographical comics, and a lot of my all-time favorites, though. I like everything that the Hernandez brothers still do. I find myself always naming the same people, my peers. I'm very when people ask me who my favorite artists are, it's embarrassing how often I rattle off the same names, the Hernandez brothers and Dan Clowes and Chester Brown, but they all, like me, they've all, well, not so much. The Hernandez brothers are still pretty prolific, but it's been years since Dan Clowes has done a comic, and it's been years since Chester Brown has done a comic, but they're still my favorites, though. Whenever they come out with anything, I'm just floored by it. Adrian Tomani, every time he does a new comic, I'm flabbergasted. He is so good, And sometimes I'm like, did I exaggerate that in my head? The people who were my favorites going back in the 1990s, did I exaggerate in my mind how good they are? But then someone like Adrian will do a new comic, and I'll think, no, I didn't exaggerate. He's fantastic.
Yeah, but then the ones you just mentioned, they are that good.
Yeah.
It's
yes.
Not that, oh my God, my peers. Maybe
yes.
I'm wrong. Oh, you're not wrong.
And another person who has just been knocking me out, he keeps getting better and better, is Bill Griffith. He did that memoir about his mother, and then he did that one about the Pinhead, who inspired Zippy the Pinhead. They are so good. I can't believe how good those books are, and he's in his 70s and he's doing the best work of his life. So that's somebody who I think is just absolutely amazing.
And in terms of TV shows or novels, are you following anything? Reading anything?
Yeah, I watch, these days because of Netflix and Amazon, there's so many movies and TV shows watch. It's kind of amazing. So yes, there's lots of movies I've been watching, being entertained to death. It's funny though, whenever I think about what I've watched that sticks with me, it's always documentaries. They are the ones that I just watched one about a photographer named Slim Aarons, and he was like a lifestyle of the rich and famous photographer, most famous in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. If you see some of his work, you would have realized, oh, I've seen that before. Okay. But I didn't know his name. I didn't know anything about him. And it was both the work and his life. It was absolutely fascinating. So so that's something that I just saw that really knocked me out.
I will try. Do you remember where in the Netflix or
it was on Amazon? That's where I saw it, Amazon Prime. And and I think just Google, just type in Slim Aarons.
Okay.
Aarons. It's very fascinating.
I will find it. Thank you. Yeah. Antonio Gomez Morillo says, "Hello. I haven't followed the chat since the beginning, so I don't know if you guys have spoken about Apocalypse Nerd yet. I just read it during the confinement, and it was a little scary. Can he tell us some anecdotes about the creation of that comics?"
Well, first of all, I should say a lot of people, since the beginning of this COVID pandemic, a lot of people have told me that it reminds them of Apocalypse Nerd, and or that if they had just read it for the first time, that it's like, oh, this is similar to what's happening now. What inspired that book? And again, for those who don't know, the protagonist is somebody not an outdoorsy type, but he got talked into going on a camping trip with a friend of his, and he's a nerd. He's a computer nerd type of guy. With no survival skills. But what happened was he lives in Seattle, and while he was in the woods, North Korea nuked Seattle. So everything he knew, his life as he knew it, exploded, and he can't go back. He can't go back home. So now what? And so that was the premise for it. And the reason, what inspired me to do that was, at the time, the United States government was building up support to invade Iraq. So they were the U.S. government and the United States American media, they were constantly talking about what a threat Iraq was. You know, Saddam, we got to go get him. We got to go in there. And of course, the whole time I'm like, most people were all for it, overwhelmingly. And the whole time I was like, I don't know, this sounds like bullshit to me. And it was bullshit, it turns out. Meanwhile, everybody's getting so worked up about what a threat Iraq is. But while this is going on, there I am in Seattle. I live in Seattle. I'm listening to the news, and whatever Kim Jong, whoever was in charge of North Korea at the time, he announced that his country has the ability to drop a nuclear bomb on Seattle, in the city that I'm sitting in. And I'm like, why is nobody freaking out about that? He just threatened to annihilate me in my hometown, and everybody ignored it, because not just the government, but the media. You know, the media was the New York Times was way too busy trying, just like the president, investing all of their time and resources into selling a war in Iraq.
Yeah, the nuclear weapon thing, the nuclear, just to say, yeah.
So I was like, this is crazy. Why is everybody ignoring this guy? But then I started to think, how would I tried to picture myself surviving a nuclear attack. Like if I did survive it, what would that look like? And that's what led to Apocalypse Nerd, which actually almost became a TV show. It almost was an animated show, but yeah, it didn't get greenlit. We were some production company. They paid me to develop it, but but didn't. Like everything, I've had a lot of things in development, and nothing ever made that final stage. Nothing ever got made. Right? So I've made a lot of money in the business of not making TV shows.
Well, if they pay you for the options, you know.
Yeah, and mainly it's the development money. They'll give me $50,000 just to write a pilot script and write a Bible, you know, like something to describe the show, do some character designs, you know. So that's good money. But but I've never gotten, and I've done that many times, but it's never gone beyond that stage. Nothing's ever gotten made.
It'll happen eventually, you know, considering the streaming wars and how many, you know, more there is sooner or later, it'll happen.
Well, that's what I keep wondering. It's like they're making so many shows. And so many of the shows are like, it's the same show. Like there are so many TV shows, for example, where it's about a murder or a series of murders that are happening in some small, cute English town. And I always think small English towns in England have got to be the most dangerous place in the world. Everybody's getting murdered there.
Yeah, this is the old joke. You thought the Bronx and Harlem were dangerous in the 70s? No,
No,
small villages in London are much worse.
right? It's this picturesque little village on the North Sea.
Never go to a picturesque
go
little
there.
village in Britain because you will get killed.
That's right.
We're lucky that Stephen King hasn't started writing novels about the small little villages in the UK.
Well, he's Stephen King has convinced everybody that Maine is the most deadly place to be.
And I don't think it is. But anyway, the funny thing about all this is that when you did that, because he's telling you, how scary it was to read it, and some of the people has told you that. Was it scary for you to create it? When you were creating it, creating
Apocalypse Nerd.
Yeah, were you like, feeling like they can drop the fucking bomb at any time, and they're discussing Iraq. So It's like, for you, how was it in your head while you were creating?
Well, it was a bit disconcerting, because of course this isn't true, but I couldn't help but think, by writing this comic, is that going to make this happen? Is this going to make it true? Because and the reason that concerned me was in the comic book Hate in the 90s, at one point, the main character, Buddy Bradley, I had Buddy Bradley's father suddenly die. He suddenly died unexpectedly. And then and that comic came out right after that, my father suddenly died unexpectedly.
Shit.
And I was like, oh, shit. And then a short while after that, I had a main character named Stinky. And Stinky, I had him die. This horrible accidental death. Like accidentally, like recklessly, like kind of like his own fault, but recklessly suddenly died. Mm-hmm. And then right after that, my brother died. Not from a gunshot wound, but he also died from his own recklessness. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I can't have my characters die anymore because somebody in real life is going to die.
Well, yeah, I could. If I were you, I could honestly care the same way. I would be really worried. It's not, of course, it's not rational to think that way.
Right. No,
we are fucking animals, and we are animals, and we get that primal instinct. Like, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Yeah, why tempt fate?
Yeah. What is next for you? I mean, do you have in mind any other subject matter that you want to?
No, it's just I'm just.
Or like you just going to keep doing with the stuff you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm going to keep doing these 4-page biographical comics for a reason, and they also are of a theme. They're about it's people all throughout history, but mainly philosophers, political philosophers, who I'm writing about. Mm-hmm. But also another thing I'm working on is an online comics course. There's a company called Great Courses, and it's basically they make these 12-part TV shows, for lack of a better word, but it's basically similar to a college professor's it's like you're taking their college course. Yeah. And it high production values. So, and they only now are starting to do like how to paint, how to draw. So mm-hmm. I'm going to do how to create comics. It would be like this 12-part thing. It'll probably come out sometime next year, but that is taking up most of my time at the moment. It's
really interesting.
It's a lot more work than I thought it would be. I'm writing a script. It's not just writing because I have done, like I said, I have done college courses about writing comics, but I can't. It's not enough just to think about the course itself and what exactly I'm going to teach the students. I'm also writing. It has to be written like a script. I have to where the cameras are. What I'm going to show, how I'm going to show it. Should I draw this ahead of time, or should I have the camera on the drawing table while I draw it? And mm-hmm. which should I do? Another thing that's been very difficult too is showing other people's artwork. I don't want to just show my work, of course. So I want to show, and I am going to show other people's artwork, but it's been, this company they don't want to take advantage of what's called fair use. Mm-hmm. And I thought we'd be doing fair use, which is, this is all educational purposes. So I don't have to get anybody's permission. And why would they argue if we're just going to show a sample of their artwork for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and talk about how great it is. Talk about how, oh, this person is the best at composition. Who would object? But this company, they're owned by a corporation. They don't want to take any chance of being sued. So we're getting permission. We're going through publishers and getting official permission. And it has been so, like, some people are like, great, fantastic. In fact, even recently, surprisingly, because I thought they'd never give us permission, but the president of Archie Comics said you could use anything for free. They go, oh, we'll be honored. But other people, like before I mentioned Strapati, and we didn't ask her, but her publisher is like, just to flash the cover of her book, just to show the cover of Persepolis, they wanted $1,000.
What?
A lot of people wanted $1,000. And I'm like, we have a budget, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, if we give anybody $1,000, isn't the budget going to be blown like almost immediately? They go, yeah, no, it's like we could either show 10 samples by 10 other people, or just this one sample by this artist whose publisher wants $1,000. I know, and I've even asked, can't we negotiate? Can't we explain to them what we're trying to do? It's like they won't come down, and they're like, because I wanted to talk about her book for the same reason I just talked about it now.
Yeah,
it's the simplicity and of her art, but how it worked so well with this. It was good enough to tell this great story, but I'm going to have to talk about it briefly and not show it. I can't show what I'll be talking about.
But and you couldn't talk to Marjan about it directly?
I could ask her, try to reach her directly. I don't know her. There have been people. A few times I have gone around. There's some publishers that are, because these agreements are written in legalese. They're written by lawyers. So that when the publishers get them, it's very off-putting. To read, it was written by a corporate lawyer. So of course you're just like, ugh, what the hell? Yeah. So a lot of publishers have been totally put off by it. So, but I know what the intention is, which is just to show samples of their work and discuss it briefly. So there have been some incidences where I've gone around the publisher and gone directly to the artist. But this is artists that I know, artists I know personally. So I'm comfortable doing that. But even they'd be like, at first they're like, oh yeah, sure, of course. But then they might talk to their publisher and then they get nervous because the publisher's nervous, Oh, well. Yes.
Anyway, that sounds amazing. I actually, believe it or not, I actually know the great courses because I have two of them.
Oh, you do?
One that Neil deGrasse Tyson gave years ago, and I thought it was a podcast, and then I discovered that it was film and all that.
Oh, right.
And then one amazing lesson about Herodotus and the origins of myths and the origins of history.
Okay.
As we know it now.
Were you on it? Were you speaking on it, or did you help?
No.
Oh.
I mean, I have them. I bought them, and I know.
You watched them. I see. I got it.
Yeah, and I bought both courses, and I know how they work. So that's when you were explaining the script, I was thinking, yes, he has to do that. The lighting, where the camera is going to be, incorporate the scenes, incorporate the artists, and all that. So I can see it's going to be a lot of work, my friend.
Yeah, no, they don't want me to wing anything. Every word that I say has to be scripted. I'm reading from a teleprompter. So I'm acting. I'm actually being an actor, which I've never done before. I never read from a teleprompter. It's hard. It's hard.
Are you going to have any other artists with you? I mean,
no.
Like bringing other artists and talk about the pages and then explaining the process, or are you going to be you teaching?
No, that wouldn't be possible. Simply, for one thing, I have to go. Their studios are in Virginia, and I have to go there. They have a very elaborate state-of-the-art studio, and it has to be filmed there. So I'm not going to. It would make no sense to fly in another artist just to be in it for a minute.
Yeah.
You know, they'd have to live in Virginia. I can't think of any cartoonists I know in Virginia.
Anyway, we've been at this for more than 100 minutes already, just so you know.
Yes. So yeah, probably should wrap it up. I should get to work. But
yeah, that's what I'm going to say. That you have a life, you have a family, you have work to do. So I don't want to keep you. It's been amazing. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, very much so.
Please don't cut, because I want to say proper goodbye to you after I cut the live feed.
Okay.
But to all of you, thank you so much for being here. Tomorrow with us in Spanish. Remember, Tuesdays and Thursdays in Spanish. Martes y jueves en español. With Guillem March, Paco Díaz, and Tomeu Morey. See you all tomorrow. Thank you. Wear a mask. Protect yourself. Protect everybody. Again, to you, Peter, thank you so much for being here. It was amazing.
Oh, thank you. Take care, David.
And cutting in like 5 seconds. So see you all tomorrow.